Well, I must admit, I was the oldest person in my class. Or there was one gentleman who was the same age as me, and he finished like right a year behind me. So that was an issue. I mean, I was there with kids who were the age of my own children, of my oldest children. I have twins who are now 27 years old, boy and a girl. Um, and they're so similar in age, and their priorities are much different. They may sit in the back of the class and play video games, and I sit up front every time. So there was a disconnect. On top of that, and going back to the challenges that I may have faced, I was the only African American male in my class. There were only a few females who were African American. I think there were 5 of us in total, with me being the only male, and that was challenging also too, because
wow, and that's out of a class of 160.
Yeah, about 160 people. I was the only African American male. So, there was a disconnect with my heritage, my upbringing, my age, the fact that I had children, and also that this was a second career for me.
Hey guys, Dr. Dale here. Really quick before we start this episode, I want to ask you to support our mission by doing one thing. Just subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast channel, whichever one you listen to. Just hit that subscribe button. The way our podcasts get out there is by you guys liking it, by subscribing, and of course by sharing as well. So if you do one of those things for us right now, we really appreciate it. We work very hard to make these episodes for you guys. We work very hard to get them out for you guys and just to try to uplift the entire community. So if you can help us out by doing one of those things, subscribe, share, or like every time. I really appreciate it. Love you guys.
How did it feel when you got that med school acceptance letter?
Oh man. So I remember this day particularly. I was at the shop. It was a long day. We all worked hard. Just my nephew who worked for me, he was there, and an employee in the back was finishing up a car. And I was waiting for my MCAT results, and I knew they were coming in this day. So I'm like checking the computer every once in a while. And then I said, I'm not going to check the computer again until we close. So at 6 p.m., we closed, turned off the lights, and my nephew and I stood there. And I clicked on the button, and my MCAT results popped up. And I knew the number that I needed to matriculate into the program that I was in. And when I saw what I got on the MCAT, I screamed and jumped for joy. And one of my employees ran up to me, and said, the employee who was in the back came running up to the front, and he said, "What's going on here? It sounded like somebody hit the lotto." And I said, "I just did." And that's what it felt like. I mean, my nephew and I, he was there celebrating with me, and I was just so happy to have the MCAT behind me and to have done well on it, and to know that I was matriculating into medical school and beginning a new life.
I love it. So how many years ago now would that have been? Excuse me. It's like 7, 8 or 8, 9?
Yeah, it would have been 7 years ago.
I'm curious, how did that impact your nephew who was there with you?
Well, I know that he's always been happy for me, and he's my oldest nephew. He worked for me for about 10 years, and I know that I had a lot of influences on his life, and he's always been an upstanding individual, one that I could count on, and he was really equally happy for me, and I think that it showed a huge impact. I see him now as a father, who takes his kids' education very seriously, and takes being a father very seriously. So I think just our whole experience of us working together for so long, along with other family members who work for me, it developed a cohesiveness and an understanding. And I think it propelled them towards their own success.
I love it. I love it. During your time in med school, any issues, unexpected issues, and anything that you didn't expect, because you've been going to school and such, but it's different from being in school full time during the day and such. How was that transition? Were there any challenges that kind of snuck up on you?
Yeah, there was a big challenge. I remember starting off in the first 2 weeks, they give an exam on the first 2 weeks of your material so that you could kind of know the expectations. Because I don't care who you are, and you could likely attest to this. No matter how well you do in undergrad, getting straight A's or whatever, how intuitive the information is, You get to medical school and you struggle because there is just so much information, almost more information than one human can handle. So that was a real struggle, just the amount of information that was being thrown at me. The fact that I had to study every night and that weekends weren't for rest and weekends were for catching up on the work that I didn't, maybe internalize so much during the week. So that was a challenge, just getting used to the pace, to the workload. And then that 2-week test that I took, and I thought I did horrible. I'm like, what is this? I'm gonna fail out of medical school if this is how I do. But it turns out that my grade was better than average for the entire class of about 160 people. So once I found that out where I placed, that gave me a little bit more reassurance. And from there, I just got kind of used to the workload. As I said, I'm a planner, so when I have a task ahead of me, I sit down, I write out a to-do list, I write out some kind of guide, some kind of outline of how I'm going to get to the end of this journey. And I kind of did that week by week with medical school, with, having focused attention on the task at hand, having a time for studying, a time for my wife and children, a time for physical activity, a time for resting. And I just made sure, that I got into some sort of rhythm and kept that as well as I could, so that I could survive through medical school. And it went really well. I don't have any battle scars, I don't think, from medical school or going through my 3rd or 4th year clerkships. Everything turned out, I feel like, for the better. And I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be.
How was it? So, when I was a resident, I just had one kid. After my first child was born the first week of my 2nd year as a resident. And it became a lot more challenging for me to do things with my classmates. So, I still got along with them just fine, but I felt socially I wasn't as connected as I would have been had I not had, wife and kid and, baby duties and things like that. Do you feel as though, was there difficulty in that, being in the position where you have a family? So socially, did you feel socially distant from your class at all? Did that have any sort of impact on your studying, your, forming groups to study, things of that sort?
Well, I must admit, I was the oldest person in my class. Or there was one gentleman who was the same age as me. And he finished like right a year behind me. So that was an issue. I mean, I was there with kids who were the age of my own children, of my oldest children. I have twins who are now 27 years old, boy and a girl. And they're so similar in age, and their priorities are much different. They may sit in the back of the class and play video games, and I sit up front every time. So there was a disconnect. On top of that, and going back to the challenges that I may have faced, I was the only African-American male in my class, and there were only a few females who were African-American. I think there were 5 of us in total, with me being the only male. And that was challenging also too, because
Wow. And that's out of a class of 160.
Yeah, about 160 people. I was the only African-American male. So, there was a disconnect with my heritage, my upbringing, my age, the fact that I had children, and also that this was a second career for me. So, yeah, but, I went to a post-bac program where there were kind of older individuals. They were still much younger than me, but still some people who I could relate to and talk to and kind of knew what I was going through. And they had, a few of them had children of their own. So we were able to talk to one another and get through the hard times. But, those were a lot of challenges, just feeling like you were in isolation sometimes. Now, on top of that, I had a long drive. I lived in Cleveland and my school was in Rootstown, and that was about an hour away. So every day I had like a 2-hour commute back and forth to school. So that was time that, a lot of my friends and a lot of my classmates spend hanging out or doing whatever. But in the same regard, a lot of my classmates said that they envied me because I remember a couple of them said, hey, the only thing we have to look forward to is going back to our dorm and studying. But you get to go home every day to your family and have a totally different life that's far removed from school. And this is kind of all that we have. So that kind of brought it into perspective, maybe a little bit more appreciative of the challenges that I did have, because we all have challenges. We all have problems, but I felt like my problems were good problems.
To the listeners, I want the listeners, because I'm really big on Black men and white coats in general. What we try to make sure we do is we let people know that we're about empowering people. So we're not about, the complaining and doing things like that. There are problems out there that we acknowledge. Obviously, you've seen our documentary. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is empower people. And I think something that the listeners need to appreciate from what you're saying is, in my class, when I started med school, I started off, we had a class of 96, two of us when we started with Black men. And I thought I felt really isolated, actually, it wasn't that bad, but there were certain instances where you do feel very isolated, right? So I experienced that. But when I hear what you're saying, you were in so much more of a unique position than maybe anybody I can think of, right? In terms of, if somebody had a reason to say they were isolated, I can't imagine anybody who can list as many things out as you just listed, right? Yet you still did very well. Yet you didn't use that as an excuse not to perform, right? There's a real challenge with isolation. There's imposter syndrome. Those things are real, and we acknowledge them and we work to help people on it. But at the end of the day, you said, hey, no matter what, I've got to find the ways to perform and to execute on the task at hand so I can achieve my goals, correct?
Yeah, and my motivation to finish was very high, because it wasn't only myself that I would let down if I didn't finish or if I didn't excel. It was going to be my family, my wife and my children, who are all expecting me to provide some sort of livelihood and to be a role model. So I felt that pressure also of having to perform, not just for myself. And many folks, I remember saying, hey, my only responsibility here is to graduate medical school. I don't have to pay any bills. My parents come over and wash my clothes and cook for me and all this stuff. And, I found that incredible. And even sometimes they struggled. Sometimes they faltered and maybe not finished, on time or didn't do as well. But some did. But the fact is that we all have our challenges, and you could look at your circumstances and say, this is insurmountable, or you can take what you have and just work hard towards it. And I want to share a story really quickly. My wife gave me some of the best information early on. I learned how to ski much later on in life. I was probably in my 30s, and my wife used to ski all the time. She was a giant slalom downhill ski racer at one point. And so when I learned to ski, I got a lot better with just keeping up with her. But I remember we went out on a skiing trip. I think we were in Lake Tahoe one time. We were standing on top of the mountain, and I'm looking down at the bottom, and I'm still a newbie. And I'm like, boy, that sure is a long ways down to the bottom. And she said, Carl, you don't ski the whole mountain at one time. You ski at 10 feet at a time. You choose your next 2 or 3 turns. You see where you are there. And then you do that over and over again. And before you know it, you'll be at the bottom. And I used that advice at that time. And I have constantly reflected on the wisdom of what she gave me there. And I constantly tell myself, when I'm looking at a mound of work, when I'm looking at all of these problems or all of this stuff that needs to be done, and I just say to myself sometimes 10 feet at a time. And I've used that analogy a lot throughout my life. And I can't thank my wife, Kim, more enough for that wisdom and that knowledge.
I love that. We're definitely going to soundbite that clip right there. We're definitely taking that as a soundbite. That is amazing. I love that. I love that, man. That's brilliant, phenomenal. Why emergency medicine?
We'll be right back.
Hey, my name is Noah Thomas. I'm a current second-year medical student at Meharry Medical College. Today I'm going to be giving you a day in the life of a student on orthopedic surgery clinic and OR rotation with interventions. Let's get into it. I like to start my days around 6:30 a.m. Here you see me taking some caffeine, some fish oil, black seed oil, and a little bit of sea moss to kind of keep myself healthy and aware for the rest of the day. I will be gone for the majority of the day, so the last thing you want when you have a mask over your face is for your beer to be in your mouth or your breath to stink. So it's good to always get a good morning routine in. Here you see me taking a few of my supplements. That way I can be nice and ready for the gym. Again, since I will be gone all day, I always pack a lunch with me, a nice and healthy pre-made lunch. And I always put my white coat on afterwards because I do have a bad habit of spilling things. Now it's off to the clinic. I typically get to the clinic around 7:30 a.m., even though it doesn't open up until 8:15. I like to get here early. That way I can kind of take a look at a few things, see what type of cases we have for the day. And if I have any research that I have to work on for that day, I can kind of knock it out here early in the morning before everything starts. A typical patient load for me every day is about 40 to 70 patients, depending on the physician I'm with and which clinic I'm working at. After our wonderful nurses have seen the patients, they come and bring us the clipboard, and it's time for me to go check the patient out. During these patient encounters, I'll be going to take the current history and the physical exams. I'm blessed enough to be able to be autonomous at this clinic, so for the most part, I'll be going to see these patients by myself, and I'll present them to my attending physician on the back end. I like to be really detail-oriented with my notes and with my assessments. That way, when it comes time to present to my attending physician, I can get everything that's pertinent, positive, pertinent, negative, and I have a real clean and smooth presentation to my physician. We typically end our clinic anywhere between 4:30 to 7. It just depends on which clinic I'm at. And then after that, I'll be off to the gym. This time is really important to me because it's the only time I can actually work on my fitness and have something outside of work to do. Shortly after the gym concludes, we do have lectures in the evening time. And then in the next morning, it's off to the OR. This is my favorite part of the entire experience. I actually get a chance to throw sutures. I actually get a chance to do some plating, some screws, some retracting, first assisting, and a whole bunch of other cool things within the OR. And that's one of my typical days within the Nth Dimensions program.
Why emergency medicine? You know, had I, from hearing the career of, I might be biased because I'm an internist, internal medicine, but from hearing kind of, you know, how detailed you were describing the diagnostician aspects of being a mechanic, I would think that your brain would be wired for deep thought. Not saying that ER doctors, others are good. That came across completely wrong. But you know, internists have that reputation of spending too much time thinking and trying to diagnose. You know, even though actually ER doctors, you have to make quick diagnostics, right? You have to be fast with your diagnostics. But I'm sticking my foot in my mouth. But basically, why ER? Why ER?
So the ER is so similar to my automotive shop. You know, I had the people who came by for their routine maintenance for oil changes or brake changes or whatever. But a lot of my calls were, you know, Carl, my car broke down and I called a tow truck and I can't get to work. My kids need to be picked up. I have to go get groceries. My car's going to be there soon. You know, can you fix it up for me? Or sometimes people just pull up, hey, my car just started doing this. Can you fix it? So a lot of those things I still employ that I use in the emergency department. You know, when I see people come in to the emergency department and you get that doorway look, you see if they're breathing hard, are they in distress? How fast do I need to jump on this in order to reverse some of the things that are going on? And then the unexpectedness of it. I don't know if you've ever been driving and your car broke down. But it's probably like one of the more stressful times in people's life, besides when their health lets them down, is when their car lets them down. Because our lives revolve around our cars. So people would come into my shop just at their wits' ends, you know, sometimes crying, uncertain. They don't know how much it's going to cost, how long their car is going to be broken down, what it's going to take to fix it, and how do I pay for it. So I dealt with all of those dynamics just so often every day. And that's very similar to the emergency department. People come in sick, they weren't expecting this. They didn't know when they woke up in the morning that they were going to have a heart attack or a stroke, or that they were going to, you know, get hit by a car or cut a finger off or whatever their pathology may be. They just end up in an unfortunate circumstance, and they come in at the height of their emotions, and you have to talk them down and get to the core of the problem and find that solution. And sometimes you have to do that relatively quickly, or sometimes you can say they're stable, they could wait for a while. So I found myself always doing that in my automotive shop. And the emergency department is just so similar to how the presentation occurs so often.
That's fascinating. I can now as you describe it, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I've had car issues a few times. Stuff for me not doing my part. I've had 2 engines break down on me for lack of not taking care of that oil the way I should have been taking care of the oil. And then I've had the dumbest thing I've done with my car, whatever. I'm like you, I don't care what people think anymore. But I was backing out of I don't even know how I did it. What did I do here? I was in my garage, and I don't remember what happened. All I know is that's what I did. I was in my garage, and I had my door open, and I was running out to go, I think, like turn the light off or something in my garage. And I forgot to put the car back in park. So the car, I think it was still reversing. So car starts going backwards, right? And then I try to run in there and I can't get in there in time because I would have got squished by the garage door. And then the garage, I have a median in my garage and it just essentially broke the door, just completely squished the door off.
Yeah.
And it was like, I drive right now Kias, when it was a Kia Sorento, it was a little older car when I had it before. And, they said that totaled the car. I'm like, that totaled the car? Are you serious? I had to get a new car. Well, probably the dumbest thing I've done with my car, leaving the door open while I left the car in reverse to get out.
Yeah, those kind of things happen. Mistakes happen.
They do, but it's just like you say, though, because then when something like that happens, it just completely ruins not even your day, like your month. And, everything just changes for you for the time being until you kind of let the dust settle. All right, so we're gonna wrap up here shortly, but before we do, I want to have a little bit of I want to have a little bit of fun, but before I get into we'll do the serious stuff at the end. But I just want to have a little bit of fun. Just random questions I want to ask you and just kind of hear just quick hitter answers, no thought, just random stuff I'm going to throw out there.
Sure.
Just because it's fun.
Let's do it. Start the time.
Let's start with this one. Range Rover or Porsche?
I got to go with a Porsche. They're lower to the ground. They could corner a lot better. The Range Rover, while it has a lower center of gravity than most SUVs, you still have a chance of rolling that thing. I could imagine taking the corner pretty fast and feeling some G-forces going around a sharp bend. I'd much rather a Porsche than a Land Rover.
All right, then let's do this one. Lamborghini or Ferrari?
Lamborghini for sure. Oh my God. I'm going to get a Lamborghini one of these days. I almost bought one by mistake. It was either that or a minivan. I'm glad I brought the minivan home. My wife would have been really upset.
I love that. I would have a Lamborghini by mistake. So I'm not into my other sports as well. I'm a basketball guy, but I think I got this right. Cleveland Browns, right? Is it Browns?
Absolutely, all day long.
All right, Cleveland Browns or Cleveland Cavaliers?
Ooh. We had LeBron James for a while, and that was a sweet moment for Cleveland. But I'm a football guy, so I got to go with the Browns. I think they've done a lot for the city. The Cavs had too, but I just love the Browns. I love the idea of that physicalness of playing football. Not that basketball isn't physical. I don't want to get any hate mail. Yeah, Cleveland Browns for sure.
All right, Kyrie Irving fan?
Used to be.
Okay, I can appreciate why you say that. I can understand that. I had one more that I thought was good, but I might have forgot it. I should have written it down. Oh goodness, what was it? Oh well, that's fine. All right, so on the more serious note, you've accomplished so many things and had such an interesting journey. What is the one bit of advice you would give to anybody, not even somebody who's going to medicine, but what's the one bit of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self? What would you say?
I'd go back and tell my 20-year-old self to just try hard for the things that you want, to just go after, whatever your desires are, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes sometimes are just learning opportunities. They're opportunities to get better. So don't be so afraid of making mistakes and getting out there and putting it on the line for the things that you love. That's mostly what I would tell my 20-year-old self.
I love it. Now, one last thing I'm going to ask for you to do for me, I should say. We end all of our podcasts pretty much like this. I'd love for you to say, my name is Dr. Carl Allamby, and I am a Black man in a white coat.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to start that by saying that this is the last official day of my residency. This is where it ends, June 30th. And so I'm an official attendant. I'll be staying with Cleveland Clinic here. But I am Dr. Carl Allamby, and I am a proud Black man in a white coat.
Yeah, ain't no time for stressing. I've been really stepping. Ooh. Yeah, if you want to go get it, stop playing around. Really got on racks, ain't playing around. Wanna go stop playing around. Really got them racks, ain't playing around. Black men, white coats, here we up right now, yeah.